in the bio, I mean, I'm a bit, I don't know with what to start, because you are so prolific, but not scholar or curator or writer like most of the people attending this conference. But there is lots of abbreviations like ICT, DCHRP. So you are of a different profile a bit from majority of us. So I'm even more excited to hear what you will say about the Europeana photography project. Antonella is also working with not only in Italy, like Padova, Torino, Rome, Milan, and other places, but also she's in touch with Brussels, with the European Commission. So it's okay. Yes, I think this also what is important to mention is this. This is the last paper in this conference. So please, Antonella. No, I think we are right in time. Sorry, Wojciech, for this pushing you a bit. But please start, yes, with talking about European ancient photographic vintage repositories of digitized pictures of historical quality. Europeana or Europeana auf Deutsch. So please.
So, first of all, thank you for the invitation to this workshop or conference, more than a workshop. That has been very inspiring for me, also because of the fact that I come from a different side of the domain of photography. ICT stays for Information and Communication Technologies, and what I'm going to tell you is about a project that is on digitization of photography from the first 100 years. I brought some brochures of the project for those who were interested. There are still a few copies, but if anybody wants to have some more information, I invite you to go on the website of the project, where there are plenty of news and information on the project. Well, I am going to talk about photography in the digital world, and in particular a case of best practice that is called EuropeanaPhotography. It's a project ongoing, where we had to go through selection of themes, collections, and content in order to identify 430,000 images to be digitized. We had to address issues related with the digitization techniques, the question of the rights on the digital representations, and I will tell you a few words about the future steps. It's a photography we heard from all the presentations of these 2 days of work, that is an evolving technique, a form of artistic expression, and a form of communication. And historical photos provides witness of the time passing, reportage photos witness of events, and in the digital age, the photos are also a representation of everyday life. There is a role for photography in the cultural heritage and in the society that is changing, and there are a lot of opportunities for photography to be in the core of this changing cultural society. There are many new products and services that are emerging in the digital domain of photography. Services related to digitization, creation of archives with digital representation of photography in order to be used and accessed by students, teachers, researchers, and citizens. There are services and tools for preservation, not because photography is a way to preserve cultural heritage. I disagree with this concept that sometimes we hear, but because after having digitized photography, we had to preserve also the digital representation. So preservation is becoming a more complex activity. And eventually there are services and tools for the creative use and reuse of digital content. We are producing a new content that is the digital representation of photography, and we have to have clear ways to make this content accessible and reusable for creative products. Certainly there are some factors that must be taken into account in order to achieve these results. First, to establish a dialogue made with the facts between technology providers and the content owners. This dialogue, even if fostered and encouraged by many different actors, among which the member states, the European Commission, it is not yet a reality. And the fact that I feel a little bit out of the group in this conference is also a reality. The digitization of photography is not an alternative to museums of photography with real pictures. It is a parallel and complementary way to share knowledge about photography. So dialogue first. Second, to create models of cooperation between public and private organizations. We heard about experiences from public and private organizations during these 2 days, and models of cooperation are not always a simple matter. And finally, we need to improve the understanding and clearing the understanding and the methods of clearing for access, use and reuse of content. It is possible to imagine use and reuse of digital content as long as the issue of how to clear rights on digital images is addressed seriously and thoroughly. So, all this is the scenario where EuropeanaPhotography project started. It is a project that lasts 3 years. We started on the 1st of February 2012. We will run until the end of January 2015. There is a project coordinator that is the University of Leuven, and the technical coordinator that is my company, Promoter, is a small company in Italy. We are supported by the European Commission in the frame of the Competitiveness and Innovation Program, CIP is the acronym, in the frame of the Information and Communication Technologies support to policy development program. So you see that there are some keywords that already shape the area where we have to move: competitiveness and innovation and policy support, even if our project is about digitization of photography. These are the keywords around which we have designed our project. There are 17 public and private archives from 13 European projects that participate to the project, from 13 European countries that participate to the project, among which the Museum of History of Photography in Krakow, the colleague from Krakow just mentioned it earlier. Plus 2 technical partners that are the technical coordinator and the National Technical University of Athens for providing the technological platform of the project. The objectives of our project are first to select masterpieces of ancient photographs. This is done around and inside the 17 archives that were mentioned before, to enrich their metadata, in particular with the multilingual characteristics in order to make the catalogs more accessible and searchable by a multilingual audience. I remember you that Europe is a multilingual audience, and on the contrary of Google, we want to speak all these languages. Then to digitize the images in high-resolution formats and to keep these high-resolution images in the catalogs and the repositories of each archive. To contribute the metadata and the preview, the thumbnails, to the European digital library Europeana. So Europeana is only taking metadata, title and author, and very simple metadata about these images. And then to plan for the sustainability of the network on a long-term basis. We don't want to finish at the end of January 2015 our work. We want to take the momentum of Europeana photography in order to continue what we have done in terms of digital representation of photography. Now we addressed the images from 17 archives in Europe and the first 100 years of photography, because this was the initial objective of the project, but we think that digital representation of photography can have a larger scope, and we would like to enlarge the network of members of this project on a longer basis to address more archives and maybe more domains of the photography. The outcomes of the project are basically the delivery of 430,000 digitized pictures from the first 100 years of the photography, from 1839 to 1939, with historical, artistic, and cultural value. I can mention you that we have, as you have seen, pictures from Alinari Archive, Roger Violet in France, the archive of the Generalitat of Catalonia with pictures of the Civil War, Top Photo in the UK, Pol Photo in Denmark, Imagno in Austria. So there are many collections that tell history of photography, history of Europe, and history of the development of a new form of expression. These collections of ancient photography represent the essence of news agencies, archives, and museums, and they are rich in terms of business for the private partners and the fragile evidence of a cultural heritage. So again, we have to combine two tensions, two objectives in the vocation of the archives that participate to Europeana photography. At the beginning, content providers met in Leuven to discuss about themes, collections, and content, and we have a report about the themes and collections that will be published soon and will be publicly available online. We met to discuss about digital technologies, techniques for cataloging, standards for metadata, and this has been hosted by the Center for Image Research and Diffusion in Girona. We are addressing the issues of copyright with a suite of instruments that are developed by the project, including an online IPR guidebook, a blog, and a program of seminars, among which I would like you to consider to be invited to the next appointments about intellectual property rights of digital representation of photography that will take place in Paris on 14 and 15th of November, and in Vilnius in the frame of the ICT 2013 conference organized by the European Commission. And we have a platform, a technical platform that is developed by the National Technical University of Athens, and it is used to extract metadata from the local repositories of the archives, to map the local metadata to a common language that has been developed in the years by European projects. It is called LIDO, and it is a proposal for standardization in ISO. And then from this common ontology, we transform the metadata in the structure that is requested by Europeana. Today by Europeana, tomorrow it could be by other services that will possibly evolve. So the platform for aggregating content and transforming the metadata into a common language is called MINT, and it is publicly available. And I invite everybody who has catalogs of digital collections to consider to join our project in order to use this service. We have developed a specialized vocabulary that has around 500 concepts in 12 languages. We are translating it now in Russia as well, and there will be a Greek translation with the Greek partner. So as long as the new partners join the project, also the vocabulary evolves with the new languages. This is the mapping tool that I mentioned before. And the next step, as I told you, is to progress with this center of competence on digital representation of photography. We wanted to establish a permanent network, sort of a consortium where all the competencies can meet, and we can cooperate with new running already existing projects and new projects in the domain of the digitization. We are considering to launch a cooperation also with the Museum of Anvers, as we were listening before at their experience and the richness of collections on the daguerreotypes. There are, however, some barriers to overcome: the lack of clear licensing of digital public domain works, lack of good discovery mechanisms, and lack of awareness among content holders. And these are the areas where we wanted to continue our work. Please follow us online. These are the URL, the internet addresses. I hope that the presentations of this conference will be available, and I hope to be in contact with Carolina to give access to the knowledge that we collected during this conference. There are websites that present our work from a different point of view, more technical or more on the basis of communication, like a magazine. And these are my contacts, and I will be happy to reply to your questions. Thank you.
Don't leave, just stay there, okay? Because we'll be having a discussion right now. So Tamara, Wojciech, please come and join us. Fine. Okay, thank you for all your very interesting presentations. Well, I think I will start with asking you about, so like each and every museum can join you, yes, like in this pan-European project, photography project, yes?
Yes,
right? Yeah?
Definitely. The project itself, the digitization of the 430,000 images is ongoing. That is a machine that has started and must be completed by the end of January 2015. But we think that this experience of digitizing early photography or digitizing photography in order to make it accessible and usable and reusable is a process that is ongoing in many museums and archives. And for this reason, we want to establish a network that will last on a long-term basis. So please, museums and archives, get in contact with us, and it will be a pleasure to cooperate.
Yes, but remember that it's only for Europeans, I guess. So, no?
No, not at all, because the project, the digitization of the 430,000 is paid by European Commission, and they want that we digitize European collections. But this network of common interest is worldwide. I would say that we have definitely an international ambition.
What is very interesting, I must say, is that one of the most bizarre places in the, that we are talking about for today and yesterday, which is the Museum of History of Photography in Kraków, and looks like almost Ilya Kabakov installation in itself, very interesting but totally old school, made this move and joined you in this digital platform, and is one of the museums included to the project, or partner of the project.
The images of the museums of Kraków, of the Museum of Kraków, are part of the 430,000 images under digitization now. Yes.
Share the mic, please, okay?
Ja po polsku odpowiem.
In Polish. 1212, the English language channel is, are you switched on? Please give a sign to the speaker that you can start. This could be a continuing story of the unhappy building where the museum is located. The ill-chosen building. This museum needs a new location. A new location which it will probably not access in the coming years, or will not be able to move there even if it gets a location. So I would select the third option that seems to be the most judicious at the moment. That is to transfer at least part of the museum into the virtual sphere. What else can they do? It is not a museum that would be characterized by an intense collaboration with other such institutions all over the world, for the simple reason that they can't afford it. The collections are interesting, however, only to a certain degree, relatively a small degree, you could say. Therefore, the selection of the oldest and best works that can be distributed via the internet or made accessible via the internet is maybe the best option.
This situation, because I think what was important in Tamara's text was this mentioning or stressing the power struggle between the museums, and I think we all realize that the museums that joined the Europeana project are not the ones that we are hosting here at this conference, which is very powerful when it comes to museums. So I guess your paper was about it, yes? What was your definition and what's your place in this global power struggle? So I was really surprised by this marvelous images of Man Ray, you know, Moholy, and even Stephen Shore, which is totally unlike something you can imagine that is available in Antwerp.
Yes, we are not participating in the Europeana Photography project because we're working on our own European project, and it was a little bit too much to work on two different projects. We are coordinating a European project on daguerreotypes. Daguerreobase is the name, so it's more like a smaller project than yours. But our goal is to gather all the European-style daguerreotypes. So it's more like 25,000 items and not the 400,000 items that you're looking for. So we want to gather everything in one database, and of course these images will also go to Europeana, but for us the database is the main important thing, so that for research, for also description, we're also developing standards for description of the plate, so not only the image but the plates, the housing. So it's very interesting for conservators, but also researchers, curators, and of course just the general public that can look at 19th century history in Europe at that time. But I think as a museum we want to cooperate at European projects like this, but of course there's the issue with the copyright. It's always very difficult, and also what do we want to give to Europeana, because why should we? That's always a question also with private collectors we're dealing with, why they don't want to give their information just digital. And that's also what Sam said yesterday about, do we want to put our collection online, yes or no? We want people to come to our museum, but of course as a cultural institution, as a museum that is funded by the state, we also have to give something to our public. So it's always finding, I think, a balance between what are you showing online, what not, and how do you attract people to the museum.
I fully agree with what you said. I think that if we start talking about Europeana, we'll never finish. So maybe we can leave this for the next conference. But on what the museum, how the museum should be present online and how to attract visitors. This is something that it does not exist only for museums of photography. It is a more general issue. And in effect, what is happening is that only those who are online and who are visible online, who put the most of the information online, are attracting more visitors. So the presence online seems to not to prevent visitors to go to the museum, but instead to encourage visitors, because the museum is more known. And this is something that I cannot say in the museums of photography it works or not, because it is something that I didn't study, but certainly in the European museums, yes, because it is something that is very much studied, and there are evidences that it is going in this direction.
Ponieważ ten kontekst fotograficzno...
Because the photographic context is slowly becoming claustrophobic, I will try to throw in something from a broader context. For example, the emancipation of books on the internet induced increasing sales of paper copies of books in Poland. This would support what you just said. It is not the case that the internet will physically destroy museums, that people will cease to frequent them, but on the contrary, it may be the case that the internet will actually make people visit the buildings.
Europeana, that we can talk for ages about photography in general, but this is the last panel, as I said, so I think now we'll have to ask the audience whether they have questions to you. Do you want to ask a question? Tak, please. Oh.
I'm curious about the developing of standards for these various databases that different organizations are putting together. Who helps to develop those standards? Is it only the individuals in your specific museum or organization, or are you working especially with conservators? Because conservators often have already developed some of those standards in terms of the vocabulary.
Yes, in the case, I can only speak in the case of the Garo base, but so Photo Museum is coordinating, but we're working with 18 different partners from 13 European countries. Most of the museums participating, it's, for example, RCP in Paris from Anne-Cartier-Bresson is one of the partners, but in all the other museums, also the National Library in Denmark. Yes, I can give you a list with, I have a folder with all the names, but most of them are conservators working in these museums. So of course we attracted specialists that are working with the daguerreotypes or on the daguerreotypes to develop these standards. Yeah.
Yeah, we are the standards that I mentioned before, this proposal of a standard that is called the LIDO, which is a standard for representation of metadata for museums, libraries and archives, so a cross-domain representation of metadata, is the result of the work of 3 projects so far, and there is a 4th that is going on, with around 30 partners per project, and ranging from national museums, libraries and archives, plus local and thematic museums, and they are based on the implementation of existing standards, starting first of all by Dublin Core. Then the aggregation of content is done using the OAI PMH protocol, and the standards for the representation of the digital objects are JPEG 2000 and TIFF. So definitely the standards are not chosen by heart, but they are the results of a thorough analysis done by hundreds of experts.
European Commission is taking care of all standards in this case. Yeah? I'm not sure about the standards in our institutions, but this is for another conference also. Any other questions or remarks from the audience? Please help us with the microphone over there.
I have a question to Antonella, actually, about the number of 400 copies. Where does the number come from? Like, why 400 copies?
It was a compromise between the budget available and the richness of the collections that we have been able to put together, taking also in consideration the limit of time that already exists when we prepare a proposal to be presented to the European Commission. So it is a compromise. It is not that we think that that is the magic number for the first 100 years of photography. Not at all.
And when it comes to the file formats, what do you use? Do you use JPG 2000 and TIFF, or?
Yes, we use. This is a decision that is taken by the individual archives and museums, and these are the 2 standards that are used by them, TIFF and JPEG 2000.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the end of the room?
Ja chciałam jeszcze zapytać o Muzeum Historii Fotografii.
I would like to ask about the Museum of the History of Photography. That's a fascinating subject. A question about the Museum of the History of Photography. I would like to relate to the exhibition that you called a breakthrough one. Those are the churns of the void, or vortices of the void, showing not the original vintage prints, but reproductions or copies. Is that perhaps a way to go for the Museum of Photography? Is this something that we should accept, this detachment? Sometimes it's an idea that is a necessity. If photographs come from an album, and there is no way for us to show them even in part, the only thing that we can afford to do, if we are to be really related to the original, we could show only 2 photographs, that is a spreader of an album. These departures from orthodox methods are sometimes necessary? Thank you for that question, because it allows me to elaborate on the subject. It may be difficult to discuss such subjects, but the Museum of the History of Photography is a specific case. It breaks other standards also. At the permanent exhibition, which shows old photo techniques, photographic techniques, it shows photographs from Krakow ateliers which are reproduced by some lab. I also saw color Xerox copies presented at exhibitions. Fortunately, those times are over. But yes, this is a breakthrough, because the vortices of the void, that exhibition puts a breath of life into that museum, which started to live. It induces people to come there and view photographs which they know nothing about, but which are pleasant to view. They do not have a collection of daguerreotypes, for example. If the collections do not account for Charles Nègre or other authors, what else can we do? We have to look for ways.
Was exhibited in this particular exhibition, so it was available to the audience to see the original, so to speak. Yes, and then there were the printouts on the walls, framed and exhibited on the walls. So it was like a strangely created show photography.
Może po prostu pewnych rzeczy nie da się pokazać na wystawie.
Some things just cannot be exhibited. Maybe that's the way we should understand it. No, not necessarily. Please take the autochrome example. Autochromes were the first exhibition organized by the Museum of the History of Photography, which was recognized, positively appraised. Autochromes, do not succumb to rigid standards of exhibition. What can we do? We can print transparencies and pretend they are originals. We can do prints in color, and that is concordant with the spirit of the original. This was also viewed in very specific conditions, in conditions that cannot be recreated today. I hope this is an answer to your question.
Comments? Okay, I must say that I also like this division between ancient photography and contemporary photography. Yes, so this is like the full scope of what we've been talking about for these 2 days. Thank you very much for your presentations.